Welcome back to another episode of our special broadcast, Axis Mutual Fund Masterclass and Investor Education Initiative. I'm Tamanna Inamdar, and we're thrilled to have you back, where we're talking about mutual funds and explaining how they can make a huge difference to your investment and saving plan. So we've talked about the broad three categories of funds: equity, debt, and hybrid. But let's go into a little more detail, especially on hybrid funds. What is it? How do you decide when to go in for a hybrid fund? What are the factors and the other kinds of funds? I still have with me Ashish Gupta, Chief Investment Officer for Axis Mutual Fund, joining us today in the studio to give us some of those details. Ashish, great to have you back.
Thank you. So, as we discussed, there are two main asset categories: equity and debt. Individuals or investors can choose to invest in either of these categories based on their time horizon, based on their risk appetite, based on their life goals, or they can take a combination of this and let some experts decide it for them. So these are funds which we call hybrid funds, which invest part of the money in equity and part of the money in debt. Again, there are two kinds of hybrid funds. One in which at the start itself, the fund manager tells you that certain, let's say 60% of the fund will be invested in debt and 40% will be invested in equity, or they can be more dynamically managed. That is, the fund manager can decide based on his outlook that this year equity will do well, so I will invest a larger portion of your fund in equity and less in debt, or the other way around. So hybrid funds are nothing but a combination of investing in equity and debt. Again, at different points in time, you can choose a hybrid fund which is more focused on equity and less focused on debt, or the other way around.
So it sounds like the best of both worlds. Again, in what condition would you choose a hybrid fund? आप hybrid क्यों लेंगे? जब आपके पास equity का भी option है, अगर आपको इन्फ्लेशन बीट करना है, आपके पास डेट का ऑप्शन है अगर आपको ज्यादा सेफ खेलना है, तो आप हाइब्रिड क्यों चूज करेंगे, किन कंडीशंस में?
So the main condition would be that you don't want to decide yourself that you will invest in equity or debt. You let someone else decide how much to invest in equity and how much to invest in debt. You are outsourcing that decision making itself. The second option is that you decide that I want certain amount of my money to earn a stable return and certain amount of my money to appreciate, right, to go up in value. Then you will go for the hybrid fund which has a defined pre-decided allocation to equity and debt.
तो 60-40 करें या 50-50 करें या 70-30 करें, ये कौन डिसाइड करेगा? आपका फंड मैनेजर?
There are both options. There are actively or dynamically managed hybrid fund where the fund manager will decide, or there are static strategies which pre-decide that how much money is going in equity and how much is going on debt, and then based on your risk appetite, you want to choose a fund which is 60-40 or 70-30, the option is yours.
What is the best sort of formula for this for an average person? Because, you know, people watching are wondering, okay, so when do I make that decision, or what are the basis on which I make that decision? So can you give us some sense?
So actually global studies, long studies, 30-40 years have suggested that the best allocation strategy is 60% equity, 40% debt, right? So if that is the thumb rule for an average person investing in for the longer term, and what people can decide if that is the average, and if they are closer to a period where they have a longer time horizon than an average person. So if someone who is starting his career, then he should go for more allocation to equity. Someone who's nearing, let's say, a retirement age, he should go for higher allocation to debt. So if you keep 60-40 as the middle line, then depending on your risk appetite, you can be on either side of it.
Okay, now the other kind of fund I wanted to ask you about today is fund of funds.
Yes.
We hear about this as well a lot.
Yes.
And it sounds like some sort of magical concoction. Very simply put, what is a fund of funds?
Yes. So fund of funds is something where the concept is similar to a hybrid fund, where you choose between various funds and not just various types of funds. So as you would have seen, there are various types of equity funds also, large cap funds, small cap funds. There are various asset qualities, equity, debt, commodities. And fund of funds seek to dynamically or actively allocate between these various asset classes and these various funds.
So within equity funds,
yes,
you can choose to have a fund of funds. Is that correct?
You can have within equity fund of funds, or you can have fund which will invest across asset classes. So it will invest in equity also, debt also, commodities also. Like there are some funds which will take exposure to even gold and silver. And again, you are leaving the asset allocation decision to an expert who is deciding that at what stage, which asset class, how much money to allocate.
So how is it different from a hybrid fund then?
So hybrid fund, two ways. One, hybrid only decide between equity and debt. Secondly, in a fund of funds, within equity fund, they may choose several types of equity funds.
So is this a very popular instrument? Who is this for?
It is gaining popularity. I still believe in India it is still at its nascency. Globally, it is a much more evolved category, and there are other types of funds like index funds which have come in. So fund of funds invest into various index funds as well, but it provides an investor with a lot of opportunity for diversification. So if the investor does not want to choose 5 different funds, right, because I think for an average person it is very confusing. In every category there are multiple funds. Yeah. So best for him, the easiest for him is to choose a fund of funds who will diversify his investment across a major set of funds.
So there are options and options, permutations and combinations. Whoever is managing your money is the best person to advise you as per your tailored goals. Thank you so much, Ashish, for joining us today and breaking this down. But of course, we continue our journey of breaking down mutual funds on this special segment.